When I was in 4th or 5th grade, I asked my parents to sign me up for an astronomy class. I loved it. I went and I learned about the galaxies, about the stars, about the planets. One day, the teacher told us to come late at dark because we were going up on the roof of the building to use a large telescope. I've never used one before. So we looked at the moon with its craters. We looked at Saturn with its rings. And I was at awe. I didn't know this word, but I felt it. I'll never forget these few minutes of using a telescope for the first time in my life. I was born in 1970, which means 3 years after the Six-Day War and 3 years before Yom Kippur War. My father was an officer in the Israeli army, and most of our friends were army people, which means that I grew up on war stories. And I still remember many of them, but specifically one story. We're in Jerusalem, in the old city, as someone was telling us about this bloody battle that took place. It's called Givat HaTachmoshet, Ammunition Hill, and how an Israeli soldier got killed as he was trying to defend the life of an Arab woman. I was at awe, the same feeling. Do you remember when you experienced awe? I didn't know how to express this feeling. First, because Hebrew doesn't have a good word for it. The word that we use, ir'ah, is most often used as a synonym for fear. The days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are known as the days of awe in English, Yamim Noraim in Hebrew, which I still think almost all Israelis think as the days of fear. Maybe fear of God's judgment, I don't know. But only when I came here and I learned the term days of awe did I understand why they are called like that, and I will explain later on. And the other reason I didn't really understand awe was that it wasn't a real science until about a decade ago. Scholars didn't realize that feeling awe is a separate emotion. It's different from joy, contentment. Our body and our psyche, our soul, react differently to awe than to any other experiences. For example, when we experience awe, we often get goosebumps. We make a sound. Wow. Our face, facial expression changes, something like, and this is universal. This is not just here or in other English-speaking places. We react to awe. And recently, scholars realized that it's really, really good for our soul. It quiets down our anxiety. It triggers the release of oxytocin, which is known as the love hormone that promotes bond, trust, collaboration. Awe makes us feel that we are part of something much larger. It's not that we are the center of the universe. It quiets this nagging, negative voice in our heads that constantly tells us that we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we're not rich enough. this self-criticism mechanism that we have really quiets down during moments of awe. Professor Keltner from UC Berkeley published several months ago a book that he titled Awe, and he is probably the leading researcher in the world on the field. And he and his team try to figure out what makes people feel awe. So they tested it among thousands of people in 26 countries, 20 different languages. Just wanted to know if it's universal or if it's unique to specific cultures and countries, and they found that it was universal. And they found what they call the 8 wonders of the world, 8 causes that inspire awe. Now, they expected, as I assume most of us, that the main causes of awe will be nature. You stand by the Grand Canyon, you say, wow. You see a baby born, wow. The other thing they expected was music. When we listen to a piece of music that moves our hearts, our soul, especially when performed by extremely talented singers and musicians, we experience awe. Prayer sometimes causes awe. You know, some of the houses of worship, churches, synagogues were designed in order to create awe. So they expected these to be the awe-inspiring element, which they all are, but they were quite surprised to realize that these things are not on the top of the list. And the 2 causes of awe on top of the list greatly surprised them. It surprised me, of course, but when you read and learn about it, they actually make sense. Let me share them with you. I'll start with the second one. And to describe it, they use the term that the French Jewish sociologist Emile Durkheim coined. It's called collective effervescence. And he defined in the early 20th century collective effervescence as the feeling that we get when we become part of a group, part of something that is much bigger than us as individuals, and we perform something together. He did a lot of study on religion. He said when people go to church, go to synagogue, they experience it. They sing together. They move together. But it's not only synagogues. When you dance together, line dancing. I remember first time I saw line dancing, I thought, oh, that's stupid. But then I understood there is something really powerful when everyone knows what to do and just does the same thing together. Try to do it yourself in the living room. That's ridiculous. But when you do it with 100 people around you, you get it. That's why we pay a lot of money to go to sport events, to concerts, right? Have you experienced the wave? It doesn't take much. It's only few people. It's actually, there is a science to the wave. In few seconds, everyone in the stadium knows when to stand up, yell, raise their hands, and then to sit down. And you look around and you see this beautiful wave. You know, think about it. You are at the Red Sox game, and one of the people at the wave is probably an MIT physics professor who is waiting for a call from Stockholm telling her that she won the Nobel Prize. And the person who cleans her lab are both there, and woo! And I know it sounds silly and stupid, and some of us, and sometimes I have to admit I do the same thing. Oh, that's not for me. I'm too important. I'm too cool for that. No. We need it. It's good for our soul. We do it in services. Can we see that? That's just from 2 Sundays ago. You know, why doing that? Because it's good. And I know sometimes people look at the kids when we do it on Shabbat. What are you doing? That's not the core. It's not the core. But it invokes this collective effervescence of doing things together, of singing together. You go to a bar mitzvah, you go to a Jewish wedding, and you want to eat, and then they start the hora. It's hardly a dance. You just walk up. But everyone, the 92-year-old grandma and the cousin, the doctor, all do the... But that's the purpose of it. And it's beautiful and it's awe-inspiring, and we need it. We need it as much as possible. Just to show you when I actually prepare my sermons. Today, I thought about another way to look at it. As I was thinking about collective kvelling. We just watched Nate blowing the shofar. And I have an advantage. I can see your faces. You cannot. You started by holding your breath, and then you smiled. And then you cheered. And all of us were in that moment. But when you think about it, what did you do? You just made a little sound with a horn. He's an amazing French horn player, but that's not what he did. And it's so great. And we saw our young children reading from the Torah. And we saw Jordan singing. And we saw the young kids leading us in the first prayer. This is collective kvelling. Many of you don't know these kids, but you feel, oh. The number one cause of awe is what Professor Keltner calls moral beauty. Moral beauty is when we watch someone doing something of kindness, of courage, of strength, of overcoming. And you know what's the most beautiful thing about awe? It doesn't need to be special. We see it in everyday actions. You don't need, the Torah and Yom Kippur we're going to read, there's a beautiful verse. It says, Lo b'shamayim velo me'ever layam. It said it is not up in heaven or over the seas. You don't have to go to space to feel awe. You don't have to take a submersible 12,000 feet down to see a wreckage of a ship to feel awe. You see it when you see a person helping a child to cross the road. You go to Publix, and sometimes you see the beggars being so kind to people there. If you just train yourself and look around, you find this moral beauty all over. Our Bible is full of stories of moral beauty. So for Rosh Hashanah, we chose different kinds of stories for a different purpose. But one of my favorite biblical books is the book of Ruth. It tells the story of a Jewish family from about 3,000 years ago, lived in Bethlehem, the tribe of Judah, and for economic reasons emigrated to a neighboring country, to Edom. Her mother was Naomi, the father was Elimelech, and they had 2 sons, Machlon and Kilion. The sons grew, married 2 local wives, Ruth and Orpah. Then something tragic happened. We don't really know what. All the men of the family died. Elimelech and his sons, And here we have 3 widows. Being a widow today is not easy, but 3,000 years ago, it was much harder to survive. Women did not inherit their husbands, they did not own land. So the mother-in-law, Naomi, told her daughters-in-law, I have nothing to give you. I suggest that you will go back to your people. And I'll go back to my people, back to Canaan, back to Israel. And they said, no, we're staying with you. And she continued, she said, really, I don't have any children to give you. And even if I'll get a child, he'll be too young for you. Please go to your mother and father's home, and I'll go, and good luck to you. Which makes sense. And Orpah, one of them, indeed walked, but Ruth didn't. And then she uttered one of the most beautiful lines in the entire Bible. Ruth said to her mother-in-law, to Naomi, wherever you go, I shall go. Wherever you dwell, I shall dwell. Your God is my God, your people are my people. This is an act of moral beauty. This is an act that the Hebrew does have a beautiful word for. It's called chesed. Normally we translate it as act of loving kindness, but there is more than that. It's when somebody performed an act of extreme kindness when the person who receives it is not entitled to it. There is not even an expectation. There was no really reason for Ruth to cling to her mother-in-law. Just life of poverty and misery and being a foreigner. But she did it. But you don't have to be Ruth. These acts of moral beauty are everywhere. Just the other day, I read a little story about a man who needed his car to make a living, but it broke, and the mechanic told him that it was going to cost a lot of money. And he said to him, I don't have the money, but just keep the car for a few days. I'll ask my family, my friends. I need a car. And of course, no luck. 2 days later, the mechanic calls him and said, come and pick up the car. And he said, no, I don't have the money. He said, don't worry about it. He said, few people just chipped in and bought the parts, and I and my guys just did the work for free. You're a good man. You need a car. Enjoy it. Drive safely. You get goosebumps when you hear it. And these things happen all the time. You see a person pays the bill for somebody at the line of a supermarket. We see these little acts all the time, and these are acts of moral beauty. And you know what's the best thing about moral beauty? Is that when we observe somebody doing it, it affects us. It's already said by Immanuel Kant, the famous German philosopher, said that if we open ourselves up to acts of kindness and goodness of others, it makes us better people. People who overcome adversaries, Holocaust survivors. I cannot imagine. I looked at my grandparents. How can you really live after that? Well, most of them did. They overcame. People who are born or have different mental, physical disabilities and achieve so much. People who raise children with disabilities. We just have to train ourselves to find this moral beauty, and it's everywhere. Finding moral beauty is what Abraham Joshua Heschel would say is to find the extraordinary in the ordinary. It's to find the superb in the mundane. And it's true, that's the beautiful of awe. You don't need money. You don't need any means. It's like a muscle, though. When you train yourself to find awe-inspiring situations, it's becoming easier. I like to run in trails. And one secret that most people who do it don't like to share is that when you do it early in the morning, more often than not, you end up being covered by spider webs. And they are disgusting. I mean, they're all over you, and I'm not even talking about the bugs that they catch. Really disgusting. But on the occasions that you spot the spider web before, this is one of the most amazing things I have seen, I swear. Try to find one. This amazing construction that this little animal can do in no time. And sometimes there are some drops of dew just clinging from it. And when the sun breaks through the water and creates these little rainbows, wow. It can be disgusting, or it can be one of the most beautiful things. When we train ourselves to find awe, we find it. So why are this time of the year called the Days of Awe? Because I think that we get so many opportunities from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur to be inspired, to feel awe. We are here together. How many times have we felt awe even today? I just talked about the children, but it's really nice. The collective effervescence or collective. And there are special prayers that I think the ancient rabbis knew. When we say the Shema, everyone in this room is singing the Shema together. And I just thought about it. We say God is one, but it's not only God is one when we all say together. We all become one. It becomes this oceanic we. And we feel awe. The music of the high holidays. It can be modern, it can be traditional. We're really blessed with the best musicians around. But wow. And so much moral beauty around us. So a new year is beginning. And I would like to invite you, to encourage you, to cultivate more awe in your life. Those of you who walk, try to walk a little bit more in nature. I didn't try to scare you with the spider webs. Only really early in the morning in narrow trails. You see so many things if you just try to notice, if you're mindful of what you look. Just look at the people around in your neighborhood. When there is a hurricane or a warning, there are always people in my neighborhood, and I'm sure they're everywhere, who put up their shutters and then go around to ask who needs help. Moral beauty. They don't need to do it. I'm not entitled to get help from them, but they do it nonetheless. This is moral beauty, and you'll find it everywhere when you look. And when it comes to collective effervescence, find opportunities. I don't know, sing together, choirs, synagogues, other places. It's good for your soul. It's good for your body. Let's have a year that is greatly inspired by awe. The average person feels awe, they say, between once or twice a day. But those who want to feel it and start to look for it, feel it several times a day. So let's have an awesome year. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova.